We live in a world where the diet industry is full of unrealistic and unsustainable methods. Boring and less exciting than meal plans, a massive focus on the number on the scales, and ultimately a poor relationship with food. Today's guest brings a different approach, trying to change and challenge the diet industry. I am delighted to be joined by Graeme Tomlinson, who is known online as the fitness chef. Graeme has over 2.5 million followers across all of his social media platforms, where he aims to bust myths and give evidence-based advice in creative, humorous content. Not only this, but he is a Sunday Times best-selling author and the founder of the Fitness Chef app, where he helps empower people to make sensible choices on a weight loss journey and, of course, rediscover a love of food in a sustainable way. So without a doubt, let's welcome to the show today, Graeme. So hello, Graeme.
Hello.
Thank you for being here today.
My pleasure.
We actually get to talk in person because you've been on before, so this is your second time on Food for Thought.
Yeah, the first time was during COVID, and I don't think we could see each other on the screen. So it's the complete polar opposite today, but a lot better.
Yeah, it's a lot better. So let's start with everything that you do, which is the mindset around restriction, moving away from restriction and really channeling a positive message. The fact that life is kind of there to be enjoyed and we don't need to be terrified with every single thing that we eat or do.
Yeah, I think if you look at social media these days, all you see is people demonizing every single ingredient in every single food, and it's really difficult to know what to listen to and what to ignore.
Yeah.
I think we're at a stage now where you can potentially go down a path where if you keep absorbing that kind of content, there's no foods left to eat and you're kind of scared to eat everything. So I think it's really important to maintain context with everything that you're saying on social media, so that you're giving yourself freedom to still eat foods that you actually enjoy. Yeah. It's not actually a bad thing to enjoy a pizza now and again.
Well, this is just it. But you've immense a mass following there. And I think you've got a very unique style, a good comedy style. No one could pull off what you do but you, basically. And do you get a lot of feedback from your audience on what they actually want to see? Or do you find yourself trying to find a trend?
Yeah, I definitely haven't found myself trying to find a trend because my trend is really weird.
Yeah.
I would say when I'm creating a piece of content, I'm always doing it from the viewpoint of what somebody needs to hear. Mm-hmm. A lot of it is very simple. But yeah, I guess it's very weird me sliding down corridors, doing weird dance moves to get someone's attention. And ultimately, once I can get someone's attention, then I can deliver the messages later on in the content.
Yeah.
If you can't get someone's attention to start with, it's almost pointless. You could have the most useful, valuable, educational, entertaining video, but if it starts 10 seconds in, people have already scrolled past it.
Gosh.
So yeah, I've spent a long time kind of perfecting what stands out to start with. And I guess that's why I have a big following as well. People can kind of stop and think, what is this guy doing sliding down his hallway? Why has he got a jar of hazelnut and chocolate spread attached to his t-shirt?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a mixture, I think, now of entertainment as well.
It is funny.
And also delivering what I would like to think of valuable messages.
Oh yeah, definitely a valuable message, because you've been through several stages, I think, online, particularly protein, I think, is an interesting one to touch on. Just such a hype. I don't really know where to go from there. It's just, why? We're not protein deficient.
It's weird, isn't it? Why?
It is odd.
Why have we latched on that? I think it's it's almost become like a cultural thing now.
Yeah.
There's a massive business just in supplements and whey protein. And we all know that it's a macronutrient that is beneficial for any fitness goal, whether it's fat loss, maintenance, muscle gain, just performance. So all food manufacturers out there know this as well, and they know people are seeking protein. So if they can put high protein on their label, it's going to sell more things. But if you look at the label on a lot of these products, it's actually not very high in protein at all.
No.
I would say unless it's got 20 grams per 200 calories, it's probably not even moderate in protein.
No.
And 90% of the products, things like snack bars and cereals, they're actually not high in protein.
No, and you must know because you spent so long analysing so many products over the years. Was there anything that stands out as, oh my goodness, this is a complete and utter con?
Without kind of getting sued or anything.
Yeah, don't name the brand, but
No,
subliminally.
I would say in general,
Yeah.
there are protein bars that are pretty decent. You know, if they've got 20 grams per 200 calories, that's fine. There's a lot of snack bars that have got, I think, you know, it's like 6 to 8 grams of protein in them. And, you know, I always do the comparison. You get more protein out of 2 slices of bread.
I know.
And the cost of 2 slices of bread is like 15p.
Yeah.
The cost of some of these protein bars is like £2.
It's so worrying. You think also in some of these protein bars, so to create a protein bar in the first place, often they're not bad, but to use, you know, artificial sweeteners, you have to use extra fillers, what we now know is labelled or referred to as ultra-processed food, industrialised techniques, whereas just 2 slices of bread will give you the fibre that you actually require, some extra fortification and the protein. So that is pretty wild. And you talk about supplements, and I love that you bust a lot of these myths because there's so many you need and that you don't need in the fitness industry. How do you navigate that?
Yes. So if we talk about some of the ones that have got evidence behind them, benefit aspects of health or performance, creatine is one that has a whole heap of evidence behind it that supports benefits towards strength, muscle gain, even fat loss, but that's more inadvertent because it's just increased muscle mass that's causing more fat loss there. And I would say that one is a supplement that people should probably be taking, especially if they're training hard with intensity. But there's a lot of supplements out there. I don't know which ones you would want to talk about. I mean, whey protein is that a supplement or is that a food?
Yeah, no, protein powders classify. Yeah, you can
as
classify
a supplement.
whey. I mean, any type of protein powder is a supplement.
Yeah. I suppose it's interesting in knowing how the supplement has been made. So obviously whey protein is a waste product of milk that has been processed heavily, but it's still a very high quality source of protein.
And then split again into concentrate or isolate.
Yes.
So, you know, it's extremely processed.
Very, very processed. And I think the problem a lot of people have is they think, okay, that's called protein powder, so that must be protein. But actually you can get it from an abundance of sources, whether it's meat, fish, eggs, plants. There's a lot of different sources. But I think whey is an incredibly convenient, cost-effective way to supplement protein intake, but it shouldn't be the kind of driving force behind your protein.
It's so interesting because when I was starting out in this, I guess, discovering this online world of wellness, you know, when I went to university, there was no social media in this way. So it was really interesting doing a nutrition degree. Suddenly in this fitness space, it seemed like you had to have a protein shake after a workout, or you haven't done yourself justice by having a good day. So I do feel like there was almost this narrative that unless you took whey protein or you had a protein shake, you weren't going to achieve anything. So I love that you've said, yes, it is actually heavily backed by research and there is definitely place for protein powders, but also, you know, probably better off eating a lot of it if you can.
Yeah, I think there was that phase maybe 10, 15 years ago when people thought you have to have a protein shake immediately after your workout, otherwise you'll have no gains. But a lot of the evidence suggests that as long as you have a protein amount over 24 hours that helps with your protein synthesis, you know, okay, yes, ideally within 2 hours of a workout having 30 grams of protein is optimal for protein synthesis. But over the grand scheme of things, if you achieve a sufficient amount of protein over 24 hours, it's pretty much going to do the same thing. So less stress is required.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously to everyone listening, we're talking about supplements, people that are actually embarking on a fitness journey, you know, not just, don't worry, if you're just out there, you're not working out, or like me, you manage maybe one session a week of Pilates or something, I'm probably not the candidate for an extra protein shake. But what about L-Glutamine? You must have seen that one everywhere at the moment.
Yeah, that's been around for a long time, specifically on supplement websites. You know, you're buying this stuff, but I'm yet to see any kind of evidence to suggest any benefit.
I know.
And it's the same with BCAAs as well.
Oh, I know. That was having such a moment a few years ago, BCAAs. Everyone was drinking them in the cans.
Yeah, it was almost like a fasted cardio kind of thing. You're technically still fasted, but you're still going to help your muscles here drinking these BCAAs. But again, the evidence suggests that protein across 24 hours is the key thing.
I know.
If you want to take L-Glutamine or BCAAs, it's probably not going to do any harm. Will it have some minor benefits? Possibly, maybe, but they're so slight that it becomes a little bit pointless to be shelling out probably quite a lot of money each month using these supplements when the gains aren't really that big.
It's so interesting because do you find yourself having a large profile online, like discussing these topics? Do you get pulled up? Like I see this kind of call out culture on the internet. I really don't like it, but you know, you get sucked into something sometimes. How do you manage it when you get people that are saying to you, I've heard L-Glutamine is great for my gut health and great for my muscle mass, and even if there's no data and they're commenting under your post, how do you navigate those situations?
So I've got two options. One, I can just ignore, or two, I can reply in a respectful way with my point of view. And they can take it or leave it. And that's pretty much it. There's a lot of different pieces of content that are going out there at the moment, and people are just probably overwhelmed. And a lot of people get their education from social media these days. A lot of people form their opinions from people's content as well.
From 10-second or maybe 45 if you're lucky second clip.
Yeah, and the strange thing about it is there is some pieces of content out there that it's perfect because it is evidence-based, it is in context, it is very useful. So it's like you kind of tell people not to trust social media for information. There's some information that's like, oh, you should trust that. But then at the same time, the next post you see could be an idiot saying that plants are toxic and the worst thing for you.
I've seen that recently. Yeah. Oh gosh, it is really, really hard. And I also saw a lot of people talking about electrolytes more recently. And it's funny because we get all these questions coming to us in the Nutrition Clinic all the time. And it is from people that have consumed content of their favourite wellness influencer. But what are your thoughts on electrolytes coming in these little sachets?
Yeah, I think if you train with intensity, you're sweating a lot, then it makes sense to have extra electrolytes. But otherwise, drinking water is probably a good idea.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, again, it's a supplement that's not going to cause any harm if you take it, but is it actually giving you any extra performance benefits? No. Probably not in most cases, unless you're a long distance runner or you do ultra marathons or high rocks or that kind of thing, which would be quite beneficial.
Blows my mind because I remember a stat. So when I was writing in 2017, the average glass of water consumption in the UK was 1 glass a day. That was 2017. I'm really hoping maybe we got up to 2, even though we should be getting 6 to 8. But it's so simple, isn't it? When you strip it all back, what you've just discussed, and it's what you do so well, it's actually, guys, there's a place for some things, but most of it's just really just eat in moderation, right?
Yeah. I mean, I could expand on that, but it's probably best just to leave it at that. I think, if you're looking at the optimal way to live, certainly with regards to nutrition, a lot of people go down the rabbit field of everything has to be perfect. Everything has to be organic and grass-fed, and every single thing you put in your mouth has to be optimal. Yeah. But the reality is that as long as you're getting sufficient amounts of nutrients, a balance of macronutrients, your calorie intake is moderate enough that it's not making you hugely overweight. Yeah. The reality is that you can still include any food that you wish, but with accountability and discipline to know what's behind that food. So is it a whole tub of ice cream, which is 1,200 calories, putting you in a huge surplus over and over each day? Or is it a couple of scoops that's 250? You're still eating ice cream, but you're supporting your goals whilst doing it, as opposed to sabotaging them. Because
education is power, but the problem is the vast majority of people are not educated in understanding that. One thing I think is very brave, but equally it's emotive, because food is emotive. Everybody's got connection with the way they eat, the way they feel. The psychology of it is huge, but you discuss weight loss organizations a lot. And I, as a health professional in the background, are going, yes, come on, because it's very, very difficult. There's huge money and marketing behind some of these organisations, but sometimes they're not the most beneficial for people's health or their weight loss journey.
Agreed. Yeah, there's a massive range of these organisations, and some of them can be good, some of them can be not so helpful. I guess ultimately I have called out these organisations for years now, but when I think about it, they probably do inadvertently help some people, but not by the information that they give them. It's just kind of like a byproduct of someone has just happened to eat fewer calories based on what they've been told. But one particular organisation completely takes people away from the concept of what you need to lose weight, which is, of course, a calorie deficit. And once they do that, they then introduce their own set of rules whereby you're telling people they can eat unlimited quantities of foods that are actually moderate to high in calories, like oily fish and pasta and eggs and things like that, which is just mind-blowing. But that's one thing. The other thing is, if somebody goes 1 week and steps on the scales and has gained weight, the ability of their consultants to explain why or what they should do is unbelievable. It's like,
just to even add, being a female, your weight will fluctuate because of hormonal fluctuations, like every 4 to 5 days, depending where you're at in your cycle. So it makes no sense.
It doesn't really make any sense. As well, these people are being weighed fully clothed, presumably later in the day.
Yeah, in the evening.
In the evening, so they'll have a kind of full day of food in there. Probably very hydrated by that point in the day. Water retention, as you've said there, menstrual cycles, it can fluctuate dramatically in a 4 or 5 day period.
Even the temperature outside, if it's hot, like we've had a heat wave while we're recording this. I'm hoping when this comes out, the sun will still be there. But, you know, you retain more fluid. You will be heavier than you would on a day that wasn't so sunny outside. So it just... When you've discussed this about calories, I think there's been a lot of confusion about calories recently. And it's true. This is my opinion. I'd love to hear yours. That we know calculations are not ever going to be 100% accurate, and it is about the quality of the food we eat. But there still is the fundamental energy equation. The problem we've got is how people calculate it, because everyone's different, and that's where I think the public health messaging is so skew-if.
It's really difficult because it's a very awkward way of calculating how many calories you need, and it's not exact as well. You know, you can have 4 or 5 different calorie calculators online giving you differences within maybe 200 to 300 calories.
Yeah.
So how do you know which one? I mean, I would always say get an average of all of them and pick that. Yeah. But you're right, calories, depending on the type of macros you're eating, can be quite different.
Yeah.
So also food labeling can...
It's 30% inaccurate.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about that is people would assume, oh my God, it's 30% more calories then, but it could be 30% less. So what do we do there? Do we have to take an average and say, well, we'll just go by the label then? But you're right, it's not an exact science, but it's just the best that we have available. And it's a bit of, it's like cutting off your nose to spite your face. If you completely get rid of it, because it's not quite exact, then what are you left with?
Exactly.
You're left with going down the rabbit hole of weight loss clubs, charlatans online, kind of trying to work out on your own, which doesn't always end well.
I know, because I think there's a lack of understanding from some... I mean, I'm in this science world, but I can see it in the middle on both sides. Yeah. There's a lack of understanding of the privilege of education. Not everybody is going to understand the percentage of an almond you absorb for energy versus fibre and fat. You know, people don't know that. They just care that a pack of almonds is 100 calories, and that's how they're going to see it. So it is very, very difficult right now to get any public health message out there in the UK.
It's so difficult because you would almost need a whole paragraph to put into context what you've just said.
Exactly.
And that doesn't work with public messaging. So what do you do?
What do you do? This is just it. My dream is that we get nutrition education filtrating down into early years, because we need to start with the next generations, not only for the sustainability of the planet, but we need to do something for our health, because we're in a crisis right now, which is ironic because we've discussed obviously ultra-processed foods, and I'd love to know your views on ultra-processed foods. And the new buzz coming out, and maybe touch on your app actually as well there, and just talk me through your thoughts on this.
Yeah, ultra-processed foods, I guess you have to first establish what the food actually is, because it's very easy to say all ultra-processed foods are bad.
I know.
But if you put into context how much of those ultra-processed foods are you actually consuming, if it's a lot, then yes, that could be detrimental to your health, because you're just leaving less room to consume whole foods and getting the benefits of the nutrients, etc. But there's also a lot of ultra-processed foods that are very nutritious and accessible. So you touched on privilege earlier. For a lot of people who are on low income and haven't had the breaks in life, going and getting tinned vegetables or frozen vegetables or more cost-effective things that perhaps have been processed a little bit more, for people to come out and say you shouldn't be eating that because it's ultra-processed, or just labelling all foods as ultra-processed, makes those people think, oh my God, what am I supposed to do then? I'm going to have to go and spend £8 on a grass-fed steak, which is like 100 grams or something. So it's a very general term that I don't think is very useful.
Yeah.
But I understand the messaging behind it. Yes, we should be focusing on minimally processed foods as much as possible, but including the odd piece of ultra-processed chocolate or chips is not going to do any harm, as long as you're already obtaining enough nutrients. And yeah, about my app, it's not really a diet or a rigid meal plan. It's a self-managed nutrition tracking app for any fitness goal.
A bit more reliable than every other one out there.
Yeah, so we've got like a bunch of, maybe, I think it's 800 recipes now for inspiration. There's
800 is such a lot of recipes. Like, how do you even get 800 recipes?
So over the last few years, about 600 of them are mine.
Wow.
But now we've got people making them as well.
Because that's how you started, really.
Yeah, exactly. Putting plates of food out on Instagram, and that content didn't do very well, actually, because I wasn't even giving the recipe.
Oh, were you not?
It's just pointless.
Actually, to think of it, I probably just looked at the picture.
Yeah, that's going back a while. Yeah,
that is going back a while.
Yeah, but the database of food is all verified, which is good, because some tracking apps, it's not verified.
We know the standard one that everyone looked at for 1,200 calories a day, that toxic messaging. I mean, they're just so wildly inaccurate because it's inputted by the general public.
Yeah, so somebody could just input this apple is 500 calories when we know it's probably,
and it'll be saved
60.
on their database, and anyone will access it and probably not notice and then wonder why.
So for somebody who's embarking on a fitness journey or a weight loss journey using that app, they're going to think potentially they have no education about basic nutrition. No. They'll log an apple and think, oh my God, I've only, that's 500 calories in a day. It's just, not
we
good.
Can't shy away from the discussion of weight loss. And I like to refer to it as body fat loss a lot, 'cause technically that is what it is. Because we do have a nation that is, majority now, is overweight. And I feel like it's such a touchy subject on social media to navigate as well. I don't know if it's because I'm in my own echo chamber as a health professional that I see all the sensitive aspects to it. I see some people saying you do have to embrace different shapes and sizes. That's okay. But there comes to a point where it can hinder your health and your long-term health. Do you ever find yourself navigating those discussions around the subject of weight loss?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand both sides. I think, people should be allowed to do whatever they want to do. And I don't think there's a place for someone to shame somebody because of their body, whatever shape it's in. Yeah. However, the fundamental facts are, once you reach a certain percentage of body fat, there are health implications. That's a fact.
Yeah. You can't deny that fact.
And so there's kind of a little bit of a mix up between people saying, look, this is the case. Your risk of all these diseases does increase.
Even decreased fertility is something that's coming to light now, which I think a lot of people, it is affecting seriously. A lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah. So once you get to that level, the risk does increase. And that's a fact. It's not necessarily a criticism, but that's just the way it is. And I think some people maybe take it the wrong way and take that personally. But that said, it's it's not always the case as well. Again, nuance to this, and in the case that where is the body fat stored? So if the body fat is stored predominantly around the abdomen, which is the case for a lot of males, just genetically, the risk of certain diseases increases a lot. Whereas if body fat is stored in thighs or buttocks, it is reduced completely. So it's interesting that the body fat doesn't tell the whole story. It's the distribution of where that fat is can impact the risk factors of diseases
and
as
it's
well.
the fat people don't see. Sometimes I find that I'm just totally going off topic, and I also want to veer back to ultra-processed food in my head for 1 second. But things like fatty liver and non-alcoholic fatty liver, you know, that there's different situations where fat surrounds organs and the impact that it can have. But often it's the damage people don't see that they're doing now with their diet. And it could even be damage by following a weight loss diet that is not healthy, even though they might see the weight loss on the scale. So it's such a fine line because they won't see that damage for another 10, 20 years.
Exactly. Things take time to manifest, don't they? And generally what you see is people running into problems when they're in their kind of late 40s, 50s, 60s. And that's just the time that you've spent constantly doing things that could be detrimental. When you touched upon fat surrounding organs, again, it's impossible to see that unless you go and get a proper scan.
Who can do that these days, let alone
cost you thousands of pounds.
Thousands is definitely not the NHS.
Private healthcare for that. And the really interesting thing about that is diabetes as well. A lot of people think sugar causes diabetes, but actually no. Sugar is an issue once you have diabetes or perhaps pre-diabetic. But the number one driving factor behind type 2 diabetes is, of course, being overweight. And not necessarily the adipose tissue on the outside, it's the visceral fat, as you said, on the inside, which is surrounding the pancreas and it just can't function properly. But the messaging behind that is, don't eat sugar, you won't get diabetes.
It's bad, isn't it?
I don't understand where that's come from.
Nor do I. And there's so many, with weight, there's so many comorbidities. It is the diabetes, it is the heart disease, it's all these things where organs get clogged up. But you're right, the messaging around sugar hasn't been helped by another high profile person online, actually, around glucose in particular, which we'll go on to in a minute as well, because I do want to bust it, because I know it's probably a myth that you have seen time and time again. But on ultra-processed foods, before we completely move away from the subject, the problem we've got, and I'm finding that I have, is that there is no clear definition apart from NOVA, which is a Brazilian method from researchers. In the UK, as health professionals, we have not been given one clear definition to decipher anything. So right now, it's the Wild West, because we're having to do our own research individually. There's no governing body saying this is how you're going to handle the conversation about ultra-processed food. So every registered dietitian and nutritionist right now and doctors have no clear definition to go by. How wild is that?
It's wild because people are still making lots of claims on it. So
I know.
Yeah.
It's another example, and I hope our listeners really take from that it isn't black and white. And, you know, baked beans are fantastic and they're ultra-processed food, so you can't go wrong. But let's go back to glucose and any myth-busting content you've seen online that's shocked you like time and time again, because glucose spikes are not the worst thing in the world, are they?
No. When you eat food, you have a glucose spike pretty much no matter what it is. Of course, if you eat something that's high in, let's say, refined sugar, like some sweets, it's going to be a lot higher than if you ate a chicken breast. But the good news is the spike goes up and the spike goes down. It's like when you go for a run, your heart rate goes up and it goes down.
It comes down.
If you were all of a sudden going to say, it's basically like saying you should never go for a run because you're going to end up with cardiovascular disease. Your heart is going to be going a million miles an hour. That's like
it's so weird how it's taken such traction. It's the message we've been saying for years: build a balanced plate, because fats and fibers needed to slow the release of glucose. But suddenly it's like this sexy, exciting thing. Do you find myths like that come around that are particularly annoying?
Very. And very more so annoying because the individual that we're talking about has gained such traction with it, and it's not necessarily jealousy. It's more the amount of people that are being exposed to these myths.
It's health anxiety.
Exactly. And that's just creating another fear in someone's mind when they're trying to eat food. And eating food in order to avoid glucose spikes again is just ridiculous. As you said there, the most important thing is just having a balanced plate. Yes, if you're consuming most of your meals sugar, over time, for a lot of reasons, that's not a good idea.
No.
It's not going to fill you up.
No.
It's
No, chronic state of inflammation is not good.
Chronic glucose spikes over and over again, probably not great.
No.
But it just comes down to being pretty basic and having a protein source, a fiber source, a carb source, a starch source, and maybe a fat source as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. On the way here, I was on the train. I was actually listening to Louise Thompson's ebook, her book called Lucky, because I know she went through so much with birth trauma and all these sorts of things. But she said, because of her PTSD and the state she was in, this particular individual she'd kind of latched onto, and she discusses it in the book. And she says, I believed for a while that perhaps the reason I had these near-death experiences was because I was eating sugar. So I tried to cut it out, and then my care team were desperately like, no, this isn't right. Because when vulnerable people catch an easy, oh, this is your solution, this is what you need to do, it preys on vulnerability massively.
Yeah, massively. It's the issue as well is the people preying on the vulnerability are profiting from it because of that.
That's what I have an ethical problem with. It's profiting off of people in a way, and it's just not right. But anyway, before I go on,
the only way that you'll ever stop that is, as you've touched on before, getting proper education into people from a young age, so that as they progressively grow, they're able to filter out and know what to ignore, what to take on board. Yeah.
Is that what part of the inspiration for your app was? The fact that there was so much misinformation on these types of apps, and people do need that type of service. Yeah. It is so helpful for so many people. Is that what inspired you?
Yeah, so the main purpose behind the app was to simplify everything, because even in a lot of tracking apps, they are getting you to calculate calories burned, which is very difficult to do. It's impossible to know how many calories I burn in a day compared to how many calories you burn a day. You can take a rough estimate, but these apps are giving exact numbers and getting people to kind of they offset the calories burned each day. I think the biggest app that we talked about before does that.
Really? I didn't even notice that. God.
Yeah, there's no need. So when you're going through the sign-up process of my app, you're basically putting in all your details and putting your goal in, and it's giving you the targets for that, and it's factoring in how many calories roughly you're going to be burning each day, depending on your activity level as well.
And does it have a safety mechanism if anyone perhaps with disordered eating, does it have those caveats where it will not go lower than a certain point?
Yeah, well, we've got messaging in here where you can switch off the targets if you want to do that as well, because we're aware that is something that could potentially happen. Even if you create something with good intentions, somebody can get obsessive about it as well.
And that's so nice you've even factored that in. So just to reiterate, there are so many companies that have the financial capabilities of doing something like that, and they don't take any ownership or responsibility. So all it takes is a message or a warning or just one small caveat, because we know these programs do attract people for positive reasons and also negative reasons. It's life. We can't decipher that out. So thank you for doing that. First of all, I think that's brilliant. So we have questions from our listeners today, and the first one says that I grew up in a household where strict yo-yo dieting was the norm, and I got carried away with this mindset into my adult life. What advice would you give to start to escape this mindset and begin a more sustainable approach to eating?
I would strip it back and say, for all the years that you did the yo-yo dieting, each time, how did it go? How did you feel? And when the answer is inevitably no, it's time for change. You got to change something. So the advice that I would give is just understanding the very, very basics. And I know that that's difficult to do with everything online, but get the basics in your mind and take everything from there. I think it's really important, if you've gone through years of restrictive dieting, to just give yourself unconditional permission to eat any food at any time, because I think that's the biggest barrier that people go through. They just assume that, okay, it's time to lose weight, I'll be miserable for 2 months. That's just how it is, and that's how it's going to be. And then once that's over, they will rebound back to old habits, because the education isn't quite there, and there's no understanding that you can include any food and still achieve your goals.
That mindset, just it struck a chord with me because it just makes me think of all the clients over the years, and it's the same mindset. This is going to be miserable for me. Embarking upon any type of health journey is depressing, it's miserable, it's restrictive. That conversation has to change, or we're never going to get anywhere, are we?
I find it mind-blowing that people just automatically assume that losing body fat is synonymous with misery.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then that touches on the contentious topic we discussed earlier with the narrative around happiness and body size and shape, because it is such a sensitive issue.
Yeah.
But if we're looking at it purely from a health objective point of view, it doesn't help. How can something so negative inspire you to move forwards every day?
Exactly. There's got to be a point where you break. It's kind of like a sports person can't perform at an elite level forever. They're not going to win everything. They're not going to win every race. You're not going to win every trophy. That, you know, if you're performing at your very best, you can't sustain that forever. So it's like people expect themselves to eat everything perfectly, eat everything timed perfectly all the time for weeks and weeks and weeks, when ultimately we're human beings and we might enjoy a packet of crisps or a chocolate bar. And it's not really going to do any damage, but it's just getting to that place where you understand that eating those foods won't do any damage.
I think it's also it's the control, it's the conditioning, and people like to be given a plan. They just want you to tell them what to do.
It's easier.
It's easier, it's this. But actually, the minute they embrace they have to do it themselves, that's when the changes really happen.
The interesting thing about it is if you gave a meal plan to two different people, person A might love it because, as you said, they like to be told what to do. They have no problem changing everything, organising themselves, getting it done, and they actually enjoy the process. Person B could be completely different.
That would be me. Worst nightmare. I don't have time to stick to your ingredient list.
And it could be someone like yourself who's very busy, who doesn't have time to go shopping for all these 50 ingredients for one recipe, and then cook it and eat it at a specific time of the day.
Do you remember that phase online, the clean eating kind of phase? How did you know? I can't remember. How did you navigate that at the time? Because it was everywhere. Yeah,
it was. I think even in my early journey as a nutritionist, personal trainer, I was probably swept up with it as well, and advising people to eat clean and
it was just the language.
I guess the language is problematic because the opposite of these nutritious foods must be dirty. So it's negative, and it can lead to issues there. It's
like the angelic type of phrasing with things. It's so fascinating, which leads me on to the next question. How do you keep showing up every day? What inspires you to produce content again and again? Because you must find yourself sometimes being like, oh, I've done that. How do I make this different? Or do you just repost old videos?
So I sometimes repost content because if a particular video has got millions of views maybe a year ago, I'll have new followers since then, and I'll think, well, if this benefited a lot of people back then, it'll benefit a lot of new followers, so I can do that. But I am always looking at new pieces of content. It's ultimately a similar message all the time, delivered in a slightly different way. And I guess what inspires me to keep doing it is being motivated by the fact that so many people would watch the videos and get a lot out of it. And that tells me that it's very useful for people. So when I'm creating a single piece of content, I'm always thinking, how can I grab someone's attention? How can I make it educational? In the last couple of years, how can I make it funny? How can I make it valuable and entertaining? And if I can deliver on at least 2 or 3 of those things in a single piece of content, normally it does quite well. Another motivation is some of the content that I see online, which is just pathetic.
Unbelievable.
So it motivates me to think, well, okay, if that person has put a video up saying you can't eat bread anymore, because insert expletive here, then I'm going to probably put up a video saying, actually, you probably can eat bread.
Do you know, it's the more angry, I find it sometimes angry people online they get their voice out there for some reason.
I find one particular individual has been really popular over the last year, who's got nearly 4 million followers, who eats 12 eggs a day in one meal
Oh
with
my
liver.
goodness, with no education whatsoever.
Yeah, I find that, it's a lot of people would follow him because his content is funny because of how he reacts to things as opposed to the education behind it. But you're always going to get people who are going to believe what he's actually saying.
He's so confident in his conviction. It's just
But
unbelievable.
I think now the way he just does the videos to get his sort of taglines in, and I think maybe people are becoming a bit wise to it. I mean, fair play for building a following, but at the same time, it's pretty dangerous.
Yeah, very dangerous. Incredible, isn't it? Yeah. Sometimes I see influencers talking about a nutrition topic that I know to be completely rubbish, but they include research papers to support it. I can see exactly where this person's going there. And some key things to look out for online. How do you spot the misinformation? Because it sounds so convincing. That's really hard.
I was going to say that is very, very difficult unless you're a proper scientist.
To dissect a paper, which, to be honest, takes loads of training. Guys spent modules looking at breaking down research papers.
Yeah, breaking down research papers and understanding, even just the environment, what kind of study it is, how many people, was it done on humans? But also looking at the scientific terminology. I mean, there's a lot of words in here that sometimes, I don't even understand what they are.
It takes me a long time to look at papers.
There's people who are kind of looking at this stuff all the time. So what about general public? So it's very, very difficult. And I don't know if there is a way other than learning how to look at research. And what you often get is people cherry picking little bits of research for a headline. And a lot of newspapers will latch on to that.
Yeah, they do it all the time.
Yeah. For example, a big one over the years has been that artificial sweeteners cause cancer.
They're not even classified class 1.
No. They're in the same category as using a mobile phone or having pickled vegetables.
The only food item is red and processed meat.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, and even the context of that, the relative risk is actually a lot lower than what people would say. It's understanding what the research is actually saying. It's really difficult, that one. I don't think I've got an answer for that.
It's hard. I think just one size doesn't fit all. And if anyone's saying that, that's probably a big red flag.
I mean, it's so convincing if you say this scientific research says this, because people think, oh my God,
and then they show the little study clip. I've seen influencers do it. I saw one lady she made this horrible video about me on her page. I know exactly who she is. She's like, this nutritionist is saying this. And I'm like, well, yeah, I am, because that's public health guidance. But she sells her own products and powders and things. And she always quotes papers, but she just reads the abstract at the beginning of the paper and then says, look, it's here, and plasters it on. And then you actually read the paper, you're like, that has nothing to do with the outcome of the paper. Yeah, it's so hard.
It was done on 5 rats or something, or a petri dish.
But
I think I know who you mean.
And it's just, oh my goodness, it is a minefield. Sorry, I'm digressing. Next question. Have you personally, I think I asked you that, have you personally experienced backlash on the messages you give out online?
So, yes. When I used to do the infographics quite a lot, I would do a kind of a side-by-side. For example, the most famous one was the Nutella and avocado on toast. And yes, I did have in the graphics, Nutella was lower in calories than the avocado on toast. But I also explained the context of this.
I remember this. I think I commented for you under that.
But people will always some people just want to look for arguments, which is fine. Some people genuinely believe things, which is fine. And you try and kind of answer in a more balanced way. But yeah, I think education comes down to a lot of the comments. But what I've noticed as well, some of the comments make me think that there's a lot of people out there with orthorexia, which is just the obsession of every single thing needs to be as healthy as possible. And sometimes when you read the comments, you think, so I'm almost careful now in how I would reply to some of those comments. Yeah.
Food is a huge topic. My goodness me. It can instill the fear of life in some people, and yet it should be something that's so celebrated. Right, Graeme, fact or fiction round?
Okay, let's go.
Let's go. Okay, here we go. Number 1, lifting weights will make you bulky.
Fiction. Am I only allowed to give?
No, you can expand on it. There's too much nuance. Go on.
Okay, I'll go on for ages though. That's the thing. Lifting weights obviously can make you bulky, but you'd need to eat in a significant calorie surplus, achieve your protein goals for a long period of time for that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Being strict with your diet on weekdays and saving cheat meals on the weekend is a sustainable approach to weight loss.
I would say fiction.
Drinking apple cider vinegar will help you lose weight.
Definitely fiction.
Carbs make you gain weight.
Fiction, unless you eat lots of carbs in a massive surplus.
You burn calories without exercising.
Fact.
Coconut oil is healthier than extra virgin olive oil.
Definitely fiction.
God, I remember that one. Spot reduction exercises are key to targeting specific areas.
Fiction. That's not how fat loss works.
No, that's I used to believe that when I had no education.
It's really easy to kind of fall into that trap. You think, okay, if I've
do
got
loads of crunches.
fat around the abdomen, that's the area I need to work on. But no, our body fat is basically just like pouring a jug of water into a massive vase, and it's like it could go from anywhere.
It started in the magazines. I read that Brittany did I'll use that as an example, did like 500 crunches a day. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do 500 crunches,
When the reality is you go for a 15-minute walk each day, it would have burned more calories.
Yeah.
It's so funny, isn't it?
Mental. Putting butter or ghee in your coffee is a great thing for your overall health.
Fiction. It's probably the opposite.
Yeah. You don't need to restrict foods to be healthy.
Fact.
Following a meal plan is a form of restrictive eating.
Fact.
Well done.
I've
Speedy fact
passed.
or fiction round. Oh, I'm gutted because that does wrap up the episode. But as you know, we always finish with a food for thought. And I'll start by just saying, look at all these trends. I mean, we've just touched in the fact or fiction round on, bulletproof coffee or something for ages. Then the coconut oil. I mean, one book I even read, and it came into my clinic one day. Oh, if you've got cravings for sugar, just have a spoon of coconut oil. And I was like, that's the most absurd thing. It was honestly, this book sold loads of copies. It was like this viral, huge book at the time. I quit, the food item. And goodness me, the stuff that you see, and it just reminds you that you've got to put your detective hat on because so many of us fall victim to it, becomes a hype, and then it goes away very quickly.
There's always going to be another trend. So in the next few years, there'll be trends that will come in that we've never seen before.
Yeah.
The good news is there's people like us that just have the same message.
A bit boring, aren't we?
A little bit boring, but we've got the integrity to just keep saying what we're saying. And so, for people that are consuming the content online, I think it's just questioning everything that you see is probably a good idea. And if it does seem like it's maybe too good to be true, it probably is.
Absolutely. And Graeme, would that be your take-home message? Do you want to add anything else to our listeners?
Yeah, I would say that is probably the take-home. It probably wraps up the episode perfectly.
It does really nicely. But if everyone wants to go and check out your app or your social medias, if they bizarrely aren't following you, do you want to tell everyone where they can go to find more?
Yeah, so the app you can download from the App Store or the Google Play Store. It's just called the Fitness Chef app, original. And then social media is just the Fitness Chef, and you can find me there.
Perfect, Graeme. Thank you for coming on Food for Thought.
Thanks very much for having me. It's been good.